What's up, everyone? I know we just talked about Steven Crowder. That video was a little bit, I want to say, more serious, or at least it was, represented a real cause of concern for the way Steven Crowder thinks and revealed him to be kind of a scumbag. But this video should be lighter in tone, and it's something I wanted to talk about for a while, right? This myth of that our culture is too sensitive for movies and television, like that there are things you just couldn't make today like you did back then. Obviously there are some cases of that, right? You couldn't make the jazz singer today. You couldn't make Birth of a Nation today, right? And there have been older films that have been put under a microscope and really talked about, like Gone with the Wind. And there are people out there, of course, who don't want to watch those films or see those films accepted, but that's not a complete cultural rejection. Like Gone with the Wind is still shown on TCM all the time. People still obviously talk about these movies, watch these movies, celebrate these movies. So Steven Crowder is going to add to this myth. He's going to talk about 5 films that are so triggering you couldn't make them today. There's only one thing that would determine if a movie could be made today. Can it make money? Can it make money? If the answer is yes, it could be made today. That has always been the goal of Hollywood. That will never change. That will never change. Unless a film is so vehemently racist, so obviously racist, that it turns off the entire population of the United States, which would be difficult, it would get made today. Probably with controversy, but that's not the same thing as saying it couldn't get made today. Like, any movie, any piece of media can draw controversy from anyone, any demographic. Conservatives complain about movies all the time. They complain about movies all the time and imply that movies should not be made all the time. Right? But Steve is a cultural expert, a political commentator of the highest regard and acclaim, so I'm sure he's going to come up with some brilliant examples. So, take it away, Steve.
We were talking about this. We were sitting there. I don't know how this came up in a conversation going, oh man, that was a great film. You couldn't make that nowadays. How often do you say that to yourself? I'm guessing probably pretty often.
Pretty often.
Probably pretty often. So we actually decided to, and you've been tweeting us, we'll read them after this segment. We decided to put together a segment here. A definitive list. We'll be updating it. The top 5 films that you couldn't make in 2016. Let's do it.
If Donald Trump can get elected president in 2016, I'm guessing that all of these films could be made today. Unless he's going with something like Birth of a Nation. But he's not going to, because obviously you shouldn't make that movie today. People shouldn't accept that movie being made today and being sold. Like, when you say made today, like, you're talking about a big studio movie, right? Hollywood. Nobody should be fine with a movie as racist as Birth of a Nation being made today. But he's not going to go that route. He's like, oh, movies that are wrongfully condemned. Sorry, guys, let me make sure this isn't too loud.
For reasons that are self-explanatory, they would be far too triggering.
Yes.
So a lot of these you'll notice some trends here.
You know this is old because it has Not Gay Jared in it. Not Gay Jared was like Steven's, like his sidekick for a long time. Apparently, Not Gay Jared was getting treated like shit. And he left. I don't know the details surrounding his departure, but yeah, apparently Steven Crowder doesn't treat his employees very well, which is shocking after he completely shat on Labor Day.
Let's get right into it. Number 5 is a bit of an obvious one. Not Without My Daughter. Now, a lot of millennials watching are going, what's that? This is a film made with Sally Field, I want to say in the early 90s, about a woman who married a Muslim. They go to Iran, and obviously he keeps the daughter, beats the hell out of some women. She finds out with his Islamic family kind of how this happens a lot, by the way. People make their pilgrimage, either they're going to Mecca, secular Westerners, they marry these Muslims, they don't know what they've signed up for, and they can't get their kids back. We had Q on the show. Remember the woman who had this actually suffer in the United States? Now, here's the deal. These people, I think Alfred Molina, Sally Field, I'm sure they're probably hashtagging with her. They're probably to the left. But back then, because it hadn't been politicized, the Islamic mistreatment of women, the Islamic basically complete disregarding of women's rights, it was just seen as a human rights issue. It wasn't seen as a xenophobia or political issue. People weren't afraid to speak out against it, including liberals, because it was just like, don't wear fur. It was just an issue that, well, you shouldn't beat women, and this is a real problem in the Middle East. And this
Obviously, abuse against women in any community, in any culture, is despicable and should be condemned. Absolutely. But there's a way in which you can talk about that, and there's a way in which you can depict that culturally. If you're an outsider to a culture coming in and painting that culture as entirely or inherently abusive, inherently regressive, right? That's the problem. Like, obviously, we can talk about issues, but we have a serious, like, bad habit of taking an Islamic practice that is found in isolated incidents or in specific sects of Islam and, trying to paint the entire Islamic community around the world as being that, as being inherently that. So the way you criticize something is very important. And yes, optically it doesn't look great when a Westerner, a white Western filmmaker decides to take on that topic, and at that point it's kind of like a minefield because you're not a part of that culture, so you don't have the insight to correctly criticize it and make the important distinctions that we're talking about here. But you probably couldn't get that movie made today, I guess. I mean, was it even a big movie at the time? It certainly has not, certainly not still popular. It's not like Blazing Saddles, like, oh, you couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. By the way, I guarantee you Blazing Saddles will be on this list. That is the hack go-to, you couldn't make that movie today complaint you always get.
is the problem with Islam, and at that point it wasn't the cause du jour, so even leftists back then felt okay doing it. You could not do this nowadays. Here's a clip to show you what I'm talking about. Oh man, he's going full John Cena on her. Look at this. Ooh. Mean hook on that guy.
Mean hook. That got some punch.
She had it coming. Number 4. Dirty Harry. We're getting the tweets coming in here. I think a lot of people talked about this. A lot of people have actually suggested the one that is actually number 2 coming up soon. Dirty Harry, this is actually more so the franchise. We came up with this. We were thinking, play Misty for me, and then we thought Sudden Impact. And the reason was because women get the crap beaten out of them. Clint Eastwood punches women right in the face, including afroed hookers. And then we realized he does that in pretty much every film in that era. But Dirty Harry, you see a lot of it. Here's something that's also really important with Dirty Harry. Not only the sexist stuff, sort of insensitive stuff that you couldn't do nowadays. You'd be called into HR. But the concept of Dirty Harry was coming after a crime wave in the 60s and in the 70s where people felt really unsafe, and Dirty Harry was a police officer who didn't play by the rules, who would definitely be rough around the edges, but got stuff done. He was a hero. It's the exact opposite of the Black Lives Matter thing right now. If this were happening today, Dirty Harry would, instead of shooting the rapist in the street, he would be wearing a body camera, taking him in for questioning, and bringing in his lawyer with a lot of vowels in his name, and then eventually letting him free. So it's not just the insensitivities, but the concept of Dirty Harry would not work today.
Yes. Dirty Harry is conceptually, or at least in the way he's framed, very problematic. It's not that you can't have vigilante characters or anti-heroes, but obviously the movie explicitly condones Dirty Harry's worldview and his methods in a pretty unquestioning regard, right? If you made a movie about a cop like this but framed it as not being a hero, but, just an example of a realistic police officer, because there are cops who do exist out there, and it's fair to deal with that in the media. Like, a lot of cop movies and shows still have characters like Dirty Harry. They're just not framed as heroes anymore. Now, could you make Dirty Harry today? First off, they've been trying to make a Dirty Harry sequel forever, but Clint Eastwood is too old. I suppose now would be the worst time to do it at this specific moment in time. I would not be surprised if we came back to a point where Dirty Harry as that dashing hero would be more acceptable. But it's also weird because Dirty Harry is still a popular franchise that people still watch, people still celebrate. It's still one of the most iconic cop characters of all time. So saying it couldn't be made today is just very funny because it definitely is still popular. And there's not a campaign against Dirty Harry. But Crowder has a point here, right? The framing of Dirty Harry as not even an anti-hero so much as just a hero fighting against, an inefficient system. Yeah, that would definitely get some pushback. Whether or not that controversy would be enough to stop it from happening, I don't know. It really depends. Just like 10 years ago, we had a Punisher movie, Punisher Warzone, and that's basically the same concept as Dirty Harry. And I don't think, I guess things have changed since 2009 or 10. We're a little bit more sensitive, yes, but it's just hard for me to say that it definitely could not get made today.
Which I think.
Oh, also, it's a bad movie. Like, I totally, like, it has not aged well at all. Like, the Feelin' Lucky punk scene that comes at the very beginning after that, it is just mediocrity. It is just 70s dullness and mediocrity. Like every lame cop show you've ever watched.
Think you're seeing that a little bit with Trump. People wanted Dirty Harry. They want a strong man to come back when they felt disenchanted,
I think so.
stripped of
I think you're
power. This clip captures the chauvinism perfectly.
Then what the hell gives you the right to become an inspector when there's men have been out there on the street for 10 or 15 years?
The woman's place is in the home. Is that what you're trying to say?
What do you think this is, some kind of encounter group? I want to know what Officer Moore is going to do when somebody points a gun at her and says, hit the deck, you son of a bitch!
She's going to cower. That's what most women do, or they just get hit in the head with a snare drum. Number 3. Animal House. Yes. Now, I know what you're thinking. Is this because it was too profane? Because no, none of that. Actually, it's not even because it's a bromance. It's not even because it's they need to recast it today with women. I guess they kind of did that with Neighbors 2, Sorority Rising, which was horrendously unfunny. But Animal House, some scenes in there are the kind of scenarios that give Lena Dunham and Amy Schumer nightmares. You realize when you watch Animal House, to me what's so telling is...
Like, what world is Steven Crowder living in? We make movies like Animal House all the time. Maybe it's more sanitized. Maybe it's a little bit more politically correct. But is Animal House really defined by the aspects of it that have aged the worst? Like the formula of Animal House, the archetypes. I mean, people are still ripping off Animal House to this day. Do you know how often I see the John Belushi character on T-shirts and dorm room walls? Like, young people my age today still love this movie.
It started off from the college culture. It was assumed that people just have drunken sexual encounters. That's a big thing that happens in college. Now, again, most of these people in that film probably pretty liberal today. Not Matheson, or he just talked about how he liked Reagan. But it wasn't even considered a sexist. It wasn't considered a social issue that kids have drunk sex in college. Nobody would have even considered the idea that two people who were both drunk, who had consensual, intimate relations, would be considered rape. Now, when you watch this film, you can find...
Oh, okay, we're getting into some sketchy territory. I haven't seen Animal House in a long time. Is there a case of a perfectly sober young man taking advantage of a drunk girl? I don't really want to get into this too much because this is a very sensitive topic, but that is obviously the idea of college rape. That is obviously the go-to example. I do not think Animal House has that. I mean, Superbad. This is so funny. Superbad, which is still, I mean, that is a popular movie still. Animal House inspired, obviously. Came out 2008. The entire plot of that movie is Jonah Hill trying to buy alcohol so he can get Emma Stone drunk and then have sex with her. That's rape. He doesn't go through with it, but it's like the movie's asking you to at least go along with him on this. Maybe not root for him because he's an anti-hero, but it's like it's presented as normal enough. Superbad was only made 10 years ago, if that, and it's still insanely popular. People have pointed that out, that aspect of it, and criticized it, rightly in my opinion. But to criticize something, for something to be criticized, is not the same as it like being not financially viable. And that's the bottom line here. Is it financially viable? Hollywood will always say yes. If they think that they can get a couple of extra dollars off of a property, they don't really care beyond that.
Find at least 4 or 5 instances that would be a Salon article.
Oh, gosh.
I think this captures it pretty well. I knew a girl in high school who stuffed her bra.
Really?
Yeah, she wore the
Just
chicken,
one.
She wore the chicken cutlets. Guess what her nickname was? Cutlets. Number 2.
Oh, God, we're going to get to Blazing Saddles in a second. Question about that clip. Does the guy actually keep going? Does he keep... I mean, haven't watched the movie in a long time. If he knew that she was drunk, and if he's perfectly sober, that's definitely rape. But if you did take that one scene out of the movie, like, to me, if a movie could be like solved, as in like it would be less problematic if you just took out one scene or one moment, to me, the argument of you couldn't make that today doesn't stand, because Hollywood will just look at that, just say, well, we can take out that one moment, it'll be fine, right? And honestly, audiences are much more forgiving of older media and content than Crowder is implying here. Otherwise, Animal House would be universally despised, right? But oh my God, I cannot wait to talk about Blazing Saddles.
That's it. Everyone knew this was coming. Number 2, Blazing Saddles.
They probably thought it was going to be number 1.
They probably thought it was
They
going to be
probably
number 1.
thought so.
What do you think will be number 1? Tweet Nate S. Crowder or tweet him at NotGayJared. It might surprise you. Blazing Saddles. This could have taken up spots 5 through 1. Now this one is not as much the theme, like Not Without My Daughter or Dirty Harry, because there isn't a whole bunch of social commentary in the same way. It is just Mel Brooks at his best, and everything.
There's not a lot of social commentary. Blazing Saddles is social commentary. What, you just think like all of the racial aspects of this movie are aimless? Like Mel Brooks wasn't trying to make a point with the controversial content? It's like, and that's the thing, because it is satire, no. You could make this today. Or at least you could definitely make a movie like it today. I mean, it's weird, right? Because we're talking about movies from back then. Like, obviously, you could not pick up Blazing Saddles, drop it in today's culture, and like that would not perfectly translate, because that's not how culture works. We've just evolved, right? You couldn't, like, if you took the original Star Wars, dropped it in 2020 right now, and nobody had ever heard of Star Wars, I mean, it was just like, without the context that it's from a different era, that it would not become Star Wars. I'll tell you that. It would not become a widespread cultural phenomenon. It just doesn't work that way. But Blazing Saddles is not an antique of the past. People still do movies that push boundaries, that make people uncomfortable, that speak to very sensitive topics. People still do that. And by the way, if you can make Django Unchained today, you can make Blazing Saddles. If Quentin Tarantino can make Django Unchained and have it be such a huge movie, like Academy Award winning, huge box office hit, you can make Blazing Saddles. Now, you guys watched Django. We know about Django. I mean, I don't think Blazing Saddle has as many racial slurs throughout its runtime as Django Unchained does through the first 30 minutes. And if you're saying, well, but Django was criticized, people got upset about that. Well, not upset enough to stop it from becoming a hit, which is important. But it's not like people back in the 70s didn't take note of the extremely charged language in Blazing Saddles. It's not like people didn't notice that or did not talk about it. But with a similar situation, the fact that it was using that language to not mock black people, but to mock racists because they were, turning it around. See, when the message of your film is not racist, when it's actually anti-racist, people are a lot more forgiving. Usually.
About this film is offensive. Everything about it. Is it racist? Yes. Homophobia? It's got that. Sexist? Absolutely. Xenophobia? That wasn't even a thing back then. But sure, let's go with
They
that.
figured it out.
Whoa,
They
whoa,
figured it
whoa,
out.
whoa, whoa. What do you mean xenophobia wasn't? What? What? What the fuck are you? Okay. Nobody was afraid of immigrants before 2016. There was never any bias or prejudice against immigrants before the 21st century. I don't even know what to say about that one. Like, okay.
It was a movie, Blazing Saddles. I think the reason people love it so much is because it was a film that could only be made at that time by Mel Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if they did remake it today, the N-word would not make an appearance.
No.
And
Django Unchained is not the same thing.
No, Django Unchained is not the same thing because Quentin Tarantino is a far leftist and it is kind of providing, and it's a drama. It's not the same thing. This was just throwing caution to the wind.
What? Django Unchained, he's a far leftist? Who even knows Quentin Tarantino's politics? Like, he's not a political guy. I think I once saw him talking about, like, Michael Brown back in 2016, but he is not a famously political guy at all. And, okay, and it's a drama? I mean, okay? I don't understand what does that mean? Because it has dark humor. The humor in Django Unchained is fucking dark, right? And I know that meme, like a white person who says they have a dark sense of humor is just racist, but I think you could make the case that Django Unchained is genuinely satirical, right? But yes, it is a drama, so that means that the context of them freely and liberally using the N-word completely changes. And that's just, by the way, one example. Like, I don't want to do a whole list of modern movies that still do this, but even Quentin Tarantino throughout his entire career is still using these words. And it's not because he's a far leftist. Like, do you just see far leftists everywhere? Like, if you don't know that someone is a conservative or right-wing person, do you assume they're a far leftist? Look at this McCarthyist bullshit.
As racist, as offensive in every which way.
Unapologetically so.
Unapologetically. It's why, and back then, here's the thing, nobody had to start a march over it.
No.
Nobody for a second thought that Mel Brooks was a racist. Think about it. He had to cast all the black people for the black people to be treated in a racist way. They loved Mel Brooks. Not a person had a bad word to say
They
about
don't walk out on him like they did Adam Sandler.
Well, that's for other reasons as well. If you've
yes.
seen that film. This clip speaks for itself.
Good morning, ma'am. And isn't it a lovely morning?
Up yours, nigger.
I don't know if we have to censor that for radio. I hope we don't. I hope we don't. We didn't say it. Just drag up her corpse and hit her with the fine.
So, cool thing is that if satire is clever enough, you don't even have to really appreciate the fact that it's satire. In fact, you could watch it without even thinking of it as satire. You could just appreciate it on the surface level entertainment value. For example, if you're a fan of casual racism like Steven is, he can definitely appreciate the fact that the N-word is used here and there. It's like takes him back to a totally different era where, where he and his dad could talk the way they do at home out in public. It's a very nostalgic movie for him, I'm sure. But that doesn't mean that the satire isn't there. And it doesn't mean that, like, this is such a weird argument to make about Blazing Saddles that just throws caution to the wind. I mean, it's unapologetic because it's satire. The joke of that clip is not the N-word. The joke is you have a black man who is just being very pleasant to this, little old lady, and she just calls him a racial slur. Like, that racism is so weird and perverse that, like, that it takes what should be just a pleasant interaction and completely poisons it in a shocking way. So, Steven Crowder made the worst argument on behalf of Blazing Saddles that I've ever heard.
I don't think we have to say any more about that. If you haven't seen it, go see it. Number one. What's number one?
What's it gonna be?
Dude looks like a lady, Mrs. Doubtfire.
What?
This was a tough one. We thought we could go Tootsie because it was before Mrs.
What? Dude, this is a weird list, man. This is a weird list. Oh, screenshot. Come on, screenshot. Wait. There we go. There we go. Mrs. Doubtfire or Tootsie. Tootsie is about how hard it is to be a woman in America, in society. Like, it's about a man learning to appreciate the struggles of women. Do you not know that's what Tootsie's about? Because it has men in women's clothing? I'm really curious to see where he goes with this. All right.
Doubtfire, Dustin
Yeah.
Hoffman. But the reason we picked Mrs. Doubtfire is because it's pretty recent. Really, if you think about it, in the span of...
We grew up with this movie.
We grew up with this film. And here's what's important about Mrs. Doubtfire. If you look at the film, I mean, for those who don't know, Robin Williams plays a woman, becomes a woman in order to become a nanny and spend time with his children.
Yeah. Robin Williams plays a man who dresses up as a woman. He doesn't play a woman. Don't know if that's the distinguishing factor here, but that deserved clarification.
Was pretty progressive for its time. If you look at it, it was in San Francisco. His brother was gay. It certainly at that time was normalizing gay relationships in a way that you didn't see in a lot of films. It was making it very playful. It certainly wasn't anti-gay. But even the gay characters in this film mock the transsexual situation.
Mm-hmm.
Even the gay characters who call themselves queens and are professional makeup artists laugh about a man wanting to become a woman, because even in the gay community, it was just considered silly and absurd. Of course.
They're joking about it in the movie because Robin Williams is trying to infiltrate his ex-wife's house by dressing up as a British nanny. Like, do you realize the difference between that situation and someone who identifies as another gender, that expresses themselves as another gender? I don't understand how you can be a political commentator and have such a shallow knowledge of basic gender theory, I guess. I don't know. This is a level of ignorance. Like, this is what, from 2016? Maybe he's learned something. But this is a level of ignorance that is almost profound.
She can't become a woman. Of course this is funny. Of course this is silly. Of course it's abnormal. So the film, great film, by the way. I think Robin Williams is one of the best dramatic actors ever.
Oh, right. I forgot. Conservatives have like a really just bad taste in movies. I don't know where this comes from. Like, Mrs. Doubtfire is trash. Not because it plays up the humor of a man dressing up as a woman, because its character is a creepy, weird stalker who, again, infiltrates his ex-wife's house, and lies to her and their children. It's just a weird fucking movie. It's a weird ass movie. Still popular though. Still very popular. I'm in the minority of people who do not like it. At least I think I am. So how could you say it couldn't get made today? It's still insanely popular. But by the way, I really wanted to hear his reason why like Tootsie was too triggering. It's just because somebody dresses up in woman's clothes, right? Like that's where it starts and ends for Steve. Like, oh, libs hate that. Libs hate that. Like, what about the Rocky Horror Picture Show? That's one of the most popular movies ever, really. People my age go to see that movie all the time at the midnight screenings. Is it politically correct? I have no idea what modern political, outlooks would think of Rocky Horror Picture Show, because they don't instantly put everything through a political lens. Like, that's not an instantaneous reaction that people on the left have. They can watch movies as movies. Like, if a movie's making a political statement, that's fucked up. I mean, we notice. Or if they're even, like, implying something political or using a political message as subtext, we also notice, because we can think about these things, Steve. It's just a level of analysis. By the way, another great screenshot. Come on now. There we go. All right.
I think this is the kind of film where he was perfect. Funny, but with heart, could just rip your heart out of your chest, kind of like a Ricky Gervais, Steve Carell. There are some comedians who are so good at making you feel empathy, and I think Robin Williams was one of the best.
No Good Will Hunting? No? Mrs. Doubtfire was at the peak of Robin Williams' career? Okay.
But again, the starting off point, kind of like Animal House or Not Without My Daughter, the starting off point was that of assumed abnormality with a man acting like a woman. And that was okay, and it wasn't considered hate speech. And this was not that long ago. So nowadays, when people say, why are you so hateful? Hate speech, if you say, well, actually, you're born a boy or a girl. Imagine these scriptwriters back then with Mrs. Doubtfire. Imagine them with Slate, Salon, Daily Kos, HuffPo. There's no way this film could be made, including by liberals that set out to be pro-gay, to be pro-progressive. They would have been eaten alive. Here's a good clip to convey what I'm talking about.
Lady, come on. We gotta call the cops. We gotta dial 911 now. Why? Well, Mrs. Doubtfire, he's a she. What? He's half man, half woman. What?
Okay. Context for this clip. The kids just learned that their British nanny has been lying to them, that they've been pretending to be someone else. Like, the kids see that and they assume that, like, that this person is not who they thought. Oh my god. Oh, dude, you're really reaching on this one. Like, oh my god, dude. Like, why couldn't you have made Blazing Saddles #1? If you have to talk about this film, at least put it at number 5. You cannot tell me that this movie could not be made today. Like, no way. I mean, when Robin Williams died, rest in peace, you know how many people brought this movie up? Like, as one of the shining examples of his career? And that was, Robin Williams died around this time. People still fondly look at this movie.
What? What? Half man, half woman. They say, stay back, pervert.
Stay back!
Later in there, which is just so perfect. It's innocent. It's not hateful at all. But of course it's crazy. Of course it's abnormal. A man dressed as a woman is always gonna. Everything in your blood says this is not natural. It's like seeing an animal flash red in the kingdom. Like, oh my god, that's poison. I shouldn't touch that. This is bad. So send me your tweets at @SCrowder. What do you think should be added to the list? This has been top 5 movies you couldn't make in 2020.
So most of these movies you could make today. At best, you would have to take out a scene. And that one at number 5, I mean, if you couldn't make it today, I mean, it honestly sounds like for a pretty good reason, because our understanding of Islamic culture has evolved, right? and that I think we're just a bit more sensitive, as a Western audience, right? But yeah, most of these movies you could make today easily. And by the way, like, almost none of these films were even, like, these are not masterpieces. Like, woe to us that we cannot have Dirty Harry anymore. I mean, Blazing Saddles you could obviously make today, so I'm not going to touch that. I don't know. Like, that's just weird, right? It's just weird that you could look at culture and be so obtuse that you really think that Mrs. Doubtfire could not be made today. Like, if Robin Williams were alive, they'd be making Mrs. Doubtfire too, right? 2, 3, 4. Like, now that we have all these franchises coming back, like, no shit. And if they do have an off-color joke here or there, that's nothing audiences can't overlook in general. I mean, I'm not talking about some specific individuals or whatever. I'm talking about audiences. Audiences could overlook that. So, just the weird, like, kind of victim complex that goes into this cultural analysis, right? Like, people, like people can never like what I like anymore. Like, I'm so alone. Like, this is some born in the wrong generation shit. That's the energy Crowder is on this whole time. Like, oh man, people would never make Mrs. Doubtfire today. Fucking libtards. Like, that's how bad this sounds. That's how bad this is. But yeah, I thought this was a more ridiculous list than I was anticipating. I thought I would at least see the logic behind most of these, but especially with number 1, it was just like, it just shows you the world Steven Crowder is living in, not the world we're living in. So this was a fun list to go through, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. And yeah, I will keep you guys updated with any future content.